Captain America Brave New World is the, hold on a second, one, two, three, four, five, 38th film installment into the MCU. And first time MCU director Julius Onah takes the reins of the Captain America franchise and introduces the world to the new Cap, who is played by Anthony Mackie, alongside the new Falcon, who's played by Danny Ramirez, and the brand new Thaddeus Ross, played by Harrison Ford, minus the mustache. Now, I would love to tell you what this movie is actually about, but to keep this review spoiler free, for the most part, the trailers would have you think that this is going to be Captain America versus Red Hulk, and that is a minor part of it, but for the most part, it's going to be Sam Wilson versus Thaddeus Ross, which I found kind of interesting because a lot of their discussion is based on what Captain America means to the United States and America and the government, and how he can be controlled and how he should be used and act. But I think it's also fair to point out that the main plot of this movie, if you're not an MCU veteran, might just fly completely over your head. And if you are, it might just be too little too late. Now, moving past the story, this is an MCU movie after all, so how is the jokes and how is the action? And what I will say is, there is the classic MCU quipping in this movie and the classic joke delivery here with Captain America Brave New World, but I didn't laugh once at all throughout this entire movie, and I struggle to figure out whether that's because I'm just so used to the MCU joking delivery style, or because this movie just wasn't funny at all. Which is just such a shame to say, because Anthony Mackie, who's the lead of the movie, is in real life actually a really funny dude. But here, I think the script just lets him down and lets every other character in this movie down with just how dull and how uninspired all the jokes are. Now, to be fair, this might just be a case of the screenwriters aren't funny at all, which is a real shame, but they actually do a really good job at bringing Danny Ramirez's character, Joaquin Torres, who's the new Falcon, and Anthony Mackie, Captain America, together, and their chemistry on screen is actually quite good. And something that I really enjoyed about this movie, anytime they're on screen, any scene they're together in, it really brought out the lightheartedness and the humbleness, especially of Danny Ramirez's character, and seeing them kind of combat each other in jokes and trying to get the upper hand, and having that like mentor-mentee relationship, I thought was really, really good. Just sticking to talking about the acting here real quick, I want to talk about Harrison Ford as Thaddeus Ross, because of course he is replacing William Hunt, who unfortunately passed away in 2022, and he is doing, I'd say, a little bit of a different version of Thaddeus Ross from, of course, William Hunt's performance. It's not a one-to-one. It's a little bit more Harrison Ford, a little bit less Thaddeus Ross, I would say. The biggest compliment I can give him is that he does not look like he's having the worst time of his life, which is something that I feel like Harrison Ford just feels like these days he's picking up a paycheck at every event or gig he's doing. But here, it looks like he's having somewhat fun, but it is very much Harrison Ford at the heart of it. There's no real immersion of Harrison Ford in the role of Thaddeus Ross, and there are a lot of scenes in this movie where Thaddeus Ross is, you know, he's quite old, and whenever he is acting really decrepit or just really tired or whatever, it really feels like that's just Harrison Ford being himself, and not so much Thaddeus Ross in a position where he is just super tired and worn out, because Harrison Ford is much older than William Hunt was when he was playing the character, and you could say it's maybe just a time jump sort of thing between maybe Civil War, where the last time we saw Thaddeus Ross was, and then Brave New World. But it just really seems like he is much, much older and much, maybe not quite suited for this role, but he does a fine job, I would say. All right, this is a superhero movie. This is an MCU movie. This is an action movie. How is the action? And there are some good parts. I will admit there are some good action sequences that I'll get into a little bit later on, but I really want to talk about this. This is Captain America after all. Captain America, he's got no fucking powers, especially Sam Wilson. Like, Steve Rogers had super soldier serum. Sam Wilson has nothing. So the main part of this Captain America that would make him super strong is hand-to-hand combat and all his training. And he does have hand-to-hand combat training, and he is quite good at it. However, the way they cut the one-on-one hand-to-hand combat sequences together, just like, it's ridiculous. So I don't know, it feels like it takes inspiration from the movie Taken 3. You know that sequence where Liam Neeson is jumping over the fence and they do like a dozen cuts in 5 seconds? yeah, that feels like every hand-to-hand combat scene in this entire movie. It is just incredibly disorienting and makes it really hard to actually see what is going on in those fights. And it's just such a shame because it's one of the parts that makes the Captain America movie so good is those fighting scenes. But here they're just lost in all of the cuts and close-ups, and it just feels like impossible to actually understand what is going on. So yeah, that's a real shame. But aside from that, there are two really big action sequences and set pieces in this movie. One, of course, involving Captain America versus Red Hulk, which is more towards the end. But there's another one just before that that I didn't really see in trailers, so I'm not really going to spoil it. But they are awesome. They are just popcorn action fun, and it's really cool to see just how big and how impactful a lot of the hits and things can get in those sequences. And it's really just, it's a blast to watch. It's awesome. It's what you go to the movies for. It's what you want to watch on a big screen. But then once again, the caveat to that is, of course, those big action sequences are like CGI and green screen and everything, and that's fine, but you can really tell that. And then on the other side of that, back to the hand-to-hand combat sequences and the one-on-one fights, they also feel like they were shot on a green screen. Like, it's just so obvious. I think they took what they did in No Way Home, where they had that whole bridge sequence and most of it was CGI. And I feel like they took that and just applied it to every other MCU movie that's come out afterwards, which is a real shame because I'm pretty sure this movie was not filmed during COVID. But just every sequence that is, like almost every sequence that is outdoors, like the entire environments feel like they're on a green screen, which is just so jarring to see. There's a scene in the original Deadpool movie that's also on a bridge and is also a really cool fight sequence, but it feels like you're actually there. But here it feels like there is a real separation between the focus, like the actors in the scene, and the background. Like there's a complete separation, which is just, yeah, just so disorienting. So look, I think Anthony Mackie and Danny Ramirez really carry this movie for the most part. A lot of the action is just such a shame because the hand-to-hand combat just doesn't really satisfy you, but the big action sequences do. So it's a real kind of weighing your options here. What do you think is more important in an action movie and a superhero movie for you? And then the story, I think it's a little too late. You're pretty much going to learn exactly what you're in for from the first 2 minutes of the movie, where it kind of explains the sorts of events in the MCU that they're going to deal with. But overall, for the 38th film installment into the MCU, it just feels like they're playing the same old playbook and they don't change up the formula at all. So if you're going into this as a MCU veteran, you know what to expect. It's just a little bit on the below average side of things. So Captain America: Brave New World is a movie that just does not inspire me to rewatch it at all. And speaking of rewatching movies, in March I'm going to be watching the entire Infinity Saga again, which I'm really excited for because I haven't done that in ages. And if a movie and a series of movies makes you want to rewatch them, I think they do their job exceptionally well. And if they don't, then they just kind of fail at inspiring you at all. Just my opinion, of course.